All right. All right. Here we are. It's another Monday. I had to make sure that my sound was correct and on. Uh, yeah. Man, we almost got started on time. It seems like there's just so much going on, so much to get into. I hope that the topic today is one that people enjoy. But before we dive into it, welcome to the HEF podcast. This is the podcast of the Home Education Foundation and HEF Connect as a collaboration, and we help promote parents' freedoms to educate their children as they see fit and to direct their education. Some of that is home education or homeschooling, some of it's private school, and a mix thereof. And there's a myriad of school choice options that seem to be ever growing, and we're in favor of parent freedoms through all of those efforts and avenues. And we also want to thank our top sponsors for being with us. We have Arete, who's recently joined us this year as our title sponsor, and we have FPEA as one of our top sponsors from over the last year, and Fisher Precious Metals for coming on as a new top sponsor. So thank you guys for being with us. And you know what? We have some new people to our recognition wall, which is awesome. So I'll just venture over there and show you our recognition wall on our website. So if you go to our website at flhef.org, our website houses on the recognition wall a lot of our vendors, or these will be local businesses throughout Florida that are either based in home education or associated with home education or are ran by families that home educate, and they just love their home education freedoms and they want to show us support for all the work that we do. And they're on here with a little bit of a higher tier so that they can show off their business and with their county as well, so that if anyone's local to them, you guys can go show them the support that they show us, and we all help each other out. But we thank everybody for being on our recognition wall. We love all of you guys. And literally just before the podcast started today, I got a notification that a new family had joined to show us their support, and I just love seeing those. I love seeing those notifications come in. To me, they're my favorite because, like, I've said this before, and I just say it. I'll echo it again. Like, we love seeing the families join, kind of arm in arm with us, and go, "Hey, out of our own pockets, we're gonna help you." And we appreciate you being there with us. We hope that we're giving you enough information so that you can be informed as to kind of the things that are going on, the things that are trending right now. There's a lot of turmoil in our country and political turmoil, and a lot of the politicians and the lawmakers are the ones making the decisions. And so we sometimes feel like things are a little bit out of our hands, but you do have a voice. Your voice does matter, and the way that we're able to make that even more impactful is when we gather together as a community, and we're all unified in our voice of what we desire and what we want, especially when it comes to our children, protecting them and protecting the parents' rights to guard and protect our children as we see fit, especially in their education. So that's a lot. That's a mouthful. There's a lot of things happening right now, a lot of things that are trending, and we kind of want to talk about at least some of them so that you know what's on the horizon, what's coming. There are some things that we have heard they're going to be aiming to do in legislative session, but we're not 100% certain what form those are going to take yet. So we try not to talk in too much detail about them before the details get hashed out. And we know because there is still time for them to change their minds or listen to us before anything gets put in a bill. And we have these conversations, so that it's kind of one of those things where it's not necessarily worth talking about on the public level yet, because they're not for sure that anything specifically is going to happen. I can tell you that the overall bent or the overall idea is that PEP needs to be restricted back, and that that is definitely something they're still seeing parents spend the money in ways that everyone makes a flame and a stink about, especially in the media and in the news. And then the media and the news are making a stink in a number of other ways that are starting to get attention. And that a couple of weeks ago, I think I mentioned this on the podcast, and it was maybe one or two articles. And I was like, this is kind of odd that they would be kind of trying to paint the narrative that home educators and homeschooling is this, but essentially the new wave of racism or new segregation is homeschooling. And it at first it was like one article, two articles, and then a week later it was a third and a fourth, and now I literally can put my hands on like 8 articles that are trending. It's a growing topic, and it's a topic of growing concern. But on Twitter, MSNBC says it may seem harmless, but the insidious racism of the American religious right's obsession with homeschooling speaks volumes. And there's an article that referenced that tweet, and then also Harvard Magazine posts homeschooling. It not only violates children's rights to a meaningful education and their right to be protected from potential child abuse, but may keep them from contributing positively to a democratic society. We have an essentially unregulated regime in the area of homeschooling. All 50 states have laws to make education compulsory, and state constitutions ensure a right to education. But if you look at the legal regime governing homeschooling, there are very few requirements that parents do anything.
This
Wow.
is a central hub for
Wow.
the community. The
Sorry.
school
It's just a big, yeah. We want it. The regulations very few. We want the parents' freedoms. There's a myriad of ways. There's a myriad of choices. I think when I started homeschooling back in the 90s, a lot of the reasons that people started to homeschool were religious in nature. And, that has changed over time. More and more people just want a higher quality education. And I think that the homeschooling community over the decades has shown that the quality of education's actually pretty good. And parents are thinking, hey, can we get that for our kids? We have this work-life balance, we have these issues, but like, can we get that for our kids? And some of the reasons that parents are starting to home educate are not religious in nature. They're quality. And that kind of burns. That kind of stings when you suggest or imply, even by accident, that teachers are not doing a good enough job, that a parent could do it at home by themselves. That stings a little, and I don't know that it should. I think we should look at the overall results and say, is this what we want? Where's the data lie? Where's the data fall? And then the lawmaking should reflect opportunity and freedom, and promote parents' choice and what's best for the kids. Not simply what we want to have control over. I feel like I'm monologuing like a Disney villain, Brenda. You can interrupt
When you
me.
take a breath,
Oh,
maybe we'll interject.
no, I'll take a breath. Go
Okay.
for it. Yeah.
I wanted to say that, what the critics are missing, and obviously they want our children indoctrinated,
Mhm.
and that's what the system of public education is anymore. And anybody that's aware of what's going on in the schools will agree with that.
Mhm.
But for me, when we started home educating, it had nothing to do with anyone else. I just wanted to enjoy watching my children learn.
Yeah.
And I could tailor their education to what they needed. And so it wasn't a one size fits all. Every child is different. And
hmm
in a public school, the teachers may be wonderful, but they are limited to what they can and cannot do. I
Certainly.
have an example. I have a friend who was actually at the very school that you said you saw. They were creating a gaming
The
room.
gaming studio. Yeah.
He was teaching, and he had made up all kinds of games for the kids to play as learning tools. And as soon as they implemented the system where they started grading teachers based on the performance of their students on tests,
Oh.
he had to fold all of that up and put it in his filing cabinet and then follow the rote that was given to them. And I had
Yeah.
a niece that was teaching, and they were given exactly lesson plans that they had to implement. No creativity, no individual
Mm-hmm.
Opportunities for parents to meet the needs of children. And quite frankly, I don't think that's the best way to address education for each child. I know your children are so different in terms of what they like to do.
Yeah.
And y'all have been great in providing those freedoms and opportunities for them. But here you said we're all about parent freedom to choose. Well, I just believe parents have the best knowledge of what their kids need, and it's not up to us to make the decision. We at the Home
Mm-hmm.
Education Foundation and Home Education Connect, HEF Connect, we want to maintain as many opportunities for
Yeah.
parents to choose. No, we don't tell them what to choose, just that those opportunities are available, whether
Yeah.
it's virtual school or whether it's, if they think that a
Mm-hmm.
public school is the best choice for their kids, then go for it,
Yeah.
but it's that we need the choices so that parents can meet the needs of their own individual children.
Yeah, there's a really interesting chapter in the book Freakonomics, and I think the chapter title is "What Do Teachers and Sumo Wrestlers Have in Common?" And it's catchy and attention getting, but then as you look at it, he makes the same point that you did, which is once you introduce that form of testing to the structure, they play to the test, and what some there was a system like that that's on sumo wrestling, and so they'll intentionally throw certain matches to keep a certain balance among the contenders so that everyone can get paid. And it's similar to that. And I thought, well, that's interesting. What a dynamic that money brings and changes. And
Well,
I think that's go
that's
ahead.
a good point, because I have another friend that's a public school teacher, and their raises are tied to the students' test scores. And so
Hmm.
she's a great teacher, and the principal gave her all of these, 7 in her classroom of students that were behind or had special needs.
Right. Yeah.
So she gets graded on the performance of those, and her money
Overall.
is tied to that.
Yeah, I remember working in the school system as a media assistant, and I would hear the teachers complain about behind the scenes. Clearly, not to the children's faces, but they would complain behind the scenes that, like, oh, I just got so and so and so and so and so and so, and they're not on the level, and this is going to impact me. And they don't want them in their class, they want to get rid of them. And you got to know at some level, the kids pick up on that. They know when they're not wanted, they know when they're being tolerated versus being like encouraged or infused with like ideas and excitement and learning.
Well, and just to add to that, because I worked at the same school, but I worked in the classrooms. I was a paraprofessional, which is essentially like a classroom assistant. And I spent half the day in a first grade classroom and half the day in a third grade classroom that they had put me in specifically because those teachers needed help, because
Mm,
they both had classrooms with multiple troubled children. And
mm,
the reality was that I was the one that ended up bonding with those troubled kids and spending the time with them, because my role there was to basically remove the troublemakers from the situation so the teacher could continue teaching. And so, as well-meaning and as well-meaning as teachers might be, and as good of a teacher might be, when they're given that situation in a classroom with 30 kids, there's only so much they can do. Um, they cannot give the individual attention that's needed because logistically it's just not possible. And then you throw in kids who might have some sort of struggle. There was a kid in one classroom who was belligerent and aggressive and twisted my arm behind my back. It turned out he couldn't read, and he was acting out because he didn't know how to read. And as soon as I realized that, I started sitting down and reading with him so that he would
mm.
understand the assignments, and I was his best friend suddenly. The teacher just cannot give that level of individual attention to all 30 kids at once. And so,
Yeah, it's a struggling
yeah,
system for
it
sure.
even even really, really well-meaning teachers are in a system that is working against their best efforts just by the
Um,
sheer numbers.
it's it I'm drawing a blank. My dyslexic mind might be remembering letters in the wrong way because she always comments as preferred homeschool evaluations. But it's Julie. I'm trying to remember. Anyway, she says it was awful for me too. I remember watching another teacher cheat and point out the answers for students. It was sickening. We had well, I mean, this was your experience, Crystal. So if you want to tell it, go ahead. But I was going to talk
Um,
about
the 3rd grade classroom
the
that I was
math.
in, that
Hmm.
teacher had just given up. I mean, that's the reality. Like, she was just so burnt out that literally one day she was teaching math and she was going over, they had done their math work and she was going over the answers on the overhead projector. And she got to an answer where half the class had gotten something different. And the kids were asking her to explain how that was the correct answer. And she just was like, "It doesn't matter, just mark B," and moved on. And then later I
Hmm.
went and got her answer key and she wasn't even on the right page. So those kids were right. They had marked the correct answer, but she didn't even want to take the time to slow down and figure out why all these kids thought the answer was something different and like work that out for them. She had just given up and it was clear.
And certainly, that's a learning experience. I just don't know that they're learning what you think they're learning from it. But parents. This is not to poop on public school by any stretch of the imagination. I think there are valid moments where it's it's got its place and its use. The thing is, there are media articles that are villainizing parents who are starting to homeschool. They want to take responsibility for their own children. They want to teach their own children. They don't want to rely on anyone else to fill their heads with whatever they choose. They want to choose. They want to empower their own children and raise them themselves and teach them themselves. And they're being villainized in this nasty, nasty way. And I think it's so important. This is why I didn't see these articles when I created the Tell Your Story project, but this is one of the reasons why I created the Tell Your Story project, because the legislators didn't seem to quite understand what homeschooling is. They're thinking public school is and homeschooling is the same. It's public school just at home. And it was wildly different, but it's become even more clear to me that it's such a timely project that's so needed, because here are all these news outlets with mega reach, and they're just telling the world that homeschoolers are evil white supremacists trying to, teach their children racism. And the truth is, a lot of these parents, not even for religious reasons, just want to educate their own children, just want to take the wheel and provide the education for them, or take those precious moments from their early years and actually spend it with them, like actually have the time with them, to be the ones guiding them. And now they're being villainized, like, how dare you, you're going to rob the system of the resources, that when they count your kid, they're no longer able to be counted, so they can't allocate the funds there, and the funds are going into your hands and not theirs. And there's pulling a big stink about it. And the truth is, it's nobody else's responsibility but mine to raise my children.
I
I'm,
was
I'm
talking I was talking to a friend who lives in Jacksonville over the weekend, and he was saying that that maybe due to the opportunities parents have now to choose other options, that the public schools are thinking about, in Jacksonville, closing neighborhood schools and consolidating the schools into larger schools. Well, that's exactly what kids don't need.
yeah.
They need small environments that are learning
Hmm.
environments. But we go back to the dollar. That's probably a more efficient way to run a school system. But
Yeah.
the kids tend to interfere with their systems. I know that's why we started homeschooling, and we didn't even know there was a movement like that. Our kids weren't
Hmm.
technically old enough to be required to go to school. My daughter was going to be entering kindergarten, and she was terrified of new people and strange new situations. And so I called the school where we were supposed to go, just to go visit and get a lay of the land. And I was going to offer to volunteer in some place in the school, so she knew I was close by. And the teacher and the principal, when I asked to see the principal, and I explained this to her, she said, you will drop the kid off the first day of school. I had a clinger one time. She may cry for 30 days, but she'll make the adjustment. And I said, she won't make the adjustment in this school. I can guarantee you that. I got up and left. I was so mad with her. It was like, the kids are going to mess up our system here. And I thought, my kid's not going to be in this system. I don't know where she's going to be. But that's what drove us to try to create another option.
Yeah, our children are not products, right? We don't take them and look at them and inspect them and go, this one's an A and a grade A steak or whatever. Like they're not products. We don't mass produce them. You know, we're popping out with saying the right things and thinking the right things in this mass. They're not like on a conveyor belt going down this side of the hallway and that side with their fingers up and sitting in rows. And like, this isn't an industry and we're not pumping out product. Like, these are humans.
Well, and that whole,
they're living and thinking.
I was one of those criers. I cried for like the first 3 months of kindergarten every single day because it was terrifying for me to be dropped off somewhere where I knew nobody. And like, I didn't make friends easily, but.
And you were the pro public school one of the two of us.
I was. But that whole environment literally created massive social anxiety for me because I was so afraid of doing something wrong and getting in trouble. Like, I understood that there were rules, but I didn't always understand or believe that I understood every rule. And so I was so afraid of accidentally breaking a rule. And it created this like massive anxiety for me that I still struggle with, you know? And so I appreciate that you saw that and was like, this just isn't going to be a great fit for my daughter. We're going to do something different.
Yeah, that's good. And I think a lot of parents are seeing that. I think a lot of parents.
Which is why it's wild that the assumption is that there's some sort of racial motivation or something like that behind homeschooling.
It's an easy word to throw around to control people and scare them with. And whenever there's not a counter narrative or a counter voice to be heard, that's all people are left with is the most recent and frequent. So in marketing, it's recency and frequency. What's the thing that you hear the most and what's the last thing that you heard? You're most likely to buy that product. So whenever that's the thing that's recent and frequent, and that's the thing the media are putting out, then by and large, when people don't have an alternative thing to consider, this is what they're going to come to know it by. And that's kind of why I've been plugging the Tell Your Story project. Julie says that she would love to talk to legislators because you have so many different families over the past 30 years. Julie, if you can help us, anybody who's listening to this podcast, help us drive attention to this page to get submissions from families. I spoke to a woman last week, and her family was struggling. She was struggling with her two kids because she could see they had potential. They were kind of ahead when they went in, and then they were starting to kind of slow down and get lost in the weeds because what the teachers couldn't offer them what would help them keep up. And, you know, she's a black family. And I was just like, you know, they're calling home education racist, and here you are, you know, white segregation, and here you are saying that you pulled to give your children the best you could give them, and good on you. But collecting these stories, getting them told by the people who have lived them, and echoing those out, I think will give that other end of the story for people to hear. They can change the frequency and recency. It can change what our legislators know about home education and why it's so important to protect it with the specific stories. She says, thanks guys for what you continue to do. Gotta go tutor now. Thank you. I will do my best to try harder. I'm telling every client about you and your mission. Thank you, Julie, and thank you. Go tutor those children and raise the bar. Raise the bar. You're doing great. We appreciate your support. But yeah, I think the Tell Your Story project is critical for that reason. This isn't
Yeah.
the exact reason
And
why
and we
I
want
thought of it, but
videos from all different kinds of
yes,
homeschooling. Like, we
yes.
want to represent the spectrum of approaches, whether you're on a scholarship or not, whether you're
Hmm.
classical or eclectic or whatever you call yourself. Like, we wanna represent the variety because that's the whole point, is that it doesn't all look one way,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah,
what
and
we
I,
need to communicate.
I have the page up, so maybe this will help clarify some of what we're looking for. Is basically for you to share your perspective. What was the impact? You made this choice. You're down this road. You pulled your children. What impact did it have, Brenda? What impact did it have on your children?
Well, my daughter, fast forward toward her 11th grade, found a program, and we didn't have the internet back then, so it was very difficult to find some of the resources that people have today. But
Mm-hmm.
she found this resource called, I believe it was called Charter Oaks um, College.
Okay.
And it was a program that taught in-service teachers. So these teachers had already graduated and they were coming back probably to get CEUs for their teaching certificate on getting books published. And here she was, a junior in high school. She said, I want to do this. And so she went through a graduate level course learning how to write children's books. Um, we knew no bounds. I mean, if she could do the
Mm-hmm.
work, she could do it at a college level. And that's kind of what led us to dual enrollment. Why would you want to duplicate what you learned in high school with what you learn again in college? Why not just do it once? And
Yeah.
so that's what kind of led me to try to create an opportunity for kids to do dual enrollment. And so our kids were, they, by the time they finished homeschooling, they had completed an AA degree. And so, but kids in public school can't do that. They don't have the freedom to make
Mm-hmm.
their own choices. Their parents can't make the choices. The school makes the choices for them. So their individual abilities are either held back or
Mm-hmm.
overlooked because they're not in the middle. And that's the one thing that public school teachers have to do. They have a classroom mixed with slow learners and fast learners or
Right.
whatever, and they have to teach to the middle. So
To the
half the
middle.
class is bored and the other half is struggling. And
Those who could go faster have to go slower, and those who need to go slower are forced
Mhm.
to
right.
outpace.
So the system really, to me, makes no sense. We didn't use any curriculum because every time I
Mm,
looked at the curriculum, there was a little bit in the middle that was new information. The first part was
right.
review of last year. The last part was review for the test. And I
Hmm.
couldn't justify spending $75 on a book that only had 2 chapters with new information. So,
That's a great point. And I think that is something that is a nuance that's kind of also lost on the legislators. Why parents are spending the funds in unique ways is to give a unique approach to what they're trying to teach their children through paddle boards. Why paddle boards? Well, so we're getting out in the science, not reading about it in a book. There's so many things that you can do to make learning unique and interesting to the children. When we sit down or we tell our children, hey, we're going to do school today, they don't groan. It's not that we've brainwashed them into Pavlovian responses that don't allow them to groan. No, we are able to take what they're interested in and go, okay, cool. So you need to be learning math today. Like, hey, there's math in this. Let's figure that out.
Yeah,
Let's
and
add.
well, I was just gonna say, as home educators, I am 1 to 4 kids. So if one of them really dislikes, which this happens in our home, my daughter loves Spanish. One of my daughters loves learning Spanish,
Yeah.
and all my other kids are like, "Ugh, Spanish."
Mm-hmm.
But because I'm 1 to 4, I have the bandwidth to make sure that each of them is getting a subject that they're excited about.
Yeah.
And I am still challenging the ones that don't love it to learn the other things. but I'm able to adapt to what they're each interested in and what their passions are and what their talents are more than the system can, because the system is not
You don't have
flexible.
30 kids to
It's
cater
not that
to.
flexible.
Right. I remember the other
Yeah.
day you were doing art with the kids, and Aurora, the look on her face, she would
She
rather
was being
be
tortured.
anywhere else. Like
We have
she
one
was
daughter who
truly
loves
being
very,
tortured.
very, very in-depth art projects.
She,
Like, she
yes,
loves learning. We were
hands-on.
doing, what was it called? Needle felting, which is an
Yeah,
obscure art form. But
yeah,
one of
very.
our daughters was, like, having the time of her life.
I come in and they've
And
got
the
soap everywhere and they're just rubbing their hands on these
yeah, because
threads.
we
And
were
I'm like,
making our own
what
felt
is?
from, like, the actual threads,
Yeah.
and it was a whole process, and then you take the other felt and you use a needle to poke it into and make a picture on the background that you've made. One of my daughters was having the time of her life,
Yes, she
and the
was.
other one looked like she was being tortured.
Yes, she
So
did.
what we
Yes, she did.
decided though was, from now on, I'll introduce
Yeah.
the projects, but I'm not gonna force our daughter who doesn't love the art to go that in depth into an obscure art form. We're
Because
gonna
you
do
can
the
pivot.
introduction, and then my other daughter, on
Mhm.
her free time, of which she has plenty because she's homeschooled, on her free time, she can go and take the project and go further with it.
Yeah.
And the daughter that is more interested in other forms of art and other things can explore those things. And
Yeah,
that's
you
a
can pivot.
flexibility we have
Yes.
that is just not in the system because they can't.
Right. And when you have to come up with a craft that 30 kids can do and everybody has to do it and line up and get your sticks and get your this and everybody do that and do it at the same time. And so if anybody, you just don't have that. I think a lot of parents, going back to the original articles, like a lot of parents are just wanting to educate their own children. They're wanting to take the wheel. They want the responsibility that falls on them by the children being theirs. They want to take that and run with it, and they're being villainized. I think it's important that we offer an alternative narrative that people can echo and share and be proud of and celebrate with some of these other parents and the unique things that they're doing. So I look forward to seeing some of those submissions coming through, and I want to challenge a lot of the parents listening to really kind of dive in. Oh, you know what? Yes, this is perfect. I didn't even plan this. I just thought of Dina. What Dina told me. She asked me to contact during their home education instructional program at Class Source. She said that Leilani is actually teaching public speaking, and she said connect with Leilani and let them use the Tell Your Story project as a one of their projects that they can submit
That's
on.
a
And
great
I was
idea.
like, that's a great idea. So if there's anyone across the state who's doing any kind of public speaking classes or workshops with their kids, this would be a great project. Let me repeat that. This would be a great project for you to get involved in, because it'll both test their public speaking and it'll give them a little bit of a skill to with video work, or they can set up the video and go back and learn how to edit and
You
put
could
things
even,
together. And
if I was still teaching high school level writing, I would probably even use this as a composition project, because you have to kind of structure the point you're trying to make, and
mm-hmm.
you have to use ethos, pathos, logos. You have to have your emotional appeal. You have to
Yeah.
structure. And I used to do sometimes alternative projects, which instead of having them write, I would let them do a video or a skit or a presentation just to practice the concepts. So
Mm-hmm.
this could be used for that as well,
Huge.
to structure your message, have your thesis of what you're trying to say, build a video around it.
Yes. Yes. Definitely do that. Definitely take into consideration that if you are working in a home education community or 4-H club or something, and presentations or presenting is a part of some of the things that you're trying to teach the kids, or scouts or anything like that, and you need something to practice on, use this project. Throw it in there for consideration, that the use this project as one of the projects to practice on, because we'd love to hear all of the stories and the diverse methods and outcomes and journeys that people take, and use it, to be honest with you, to kind of balance the narrative that's being piped down people's throats. There are many people. I think that the article was one of the articles I saw was complaining that, like, now 3 to 4% of all of the students are being, it used to be like a nominal percentage, but now it's 3 to 4% of the students. It's huge, are being home educated. I'm like, that means that 97% of the rest of them have no clue, right? So
Right.
they're only going to know what's being piped at them both frequently and recently. So let's give them something else to consider. And
Well,
let's,
let me make a point that you
yeah.
were talking about, which kind of goes back to the scholarship and the use of the funds.
Mhm.
When we were homeschooling our kids, as I said before, we didn't use curriculum. First of all, there wasn't a lot of choice of curriculum. There was about 3 that would even sell to homeschoolers. But most of the things that we did were we taught math with games. And
Yeah.
I mean, now there are, video games and all kinds of other things
Oh,
that
yeah.
we didn't have, but we just use board games. And so
Hmm.
if legislators don't want you to use your funds on field trips, which was so important to gather the
Sure.
facts around something. I remember we went to Jacksonville to the fort that's over there, and we studied all about the Seminole Indians, about the 4th grade, because that's when they teach about Florida history in the 4th grade. Well, we got to actually go and visit the forts and go on field trips to see the actual things. And to me, if a child's never seen an ocean, it's pretty hard for them to understand and grasp what that even means. And I've told this story before, but I went to visit a legislator in Jacksonville, and he was running late for the appointment. And he came in, and he was hot and sweaty, and he said, "I'm sorry, I've been out on a field trip with kids from the projects." He said those kids had never seen a river. They had
Yeah.
never seen a forest.
Hmm.
And if you don't have a
Yeah.
basis for
Yeah.
your knowledge to build on, how in the world are any of those things going to be meaningful, or how are they going to retain it or make sense of it? And imagine those kids that had never seen a river with the St. Johns River running through the center of Jacksonville.
Hmm.
How do they function in the real world, because they have no experience, no basic knowledge to build their learning experience on? So to me, field trips are one of the keys
Hmm.
to home education learning. I mean,
Yes.
I think we all focus on those kinds of things. And um,
The
and
mom that I was talking to said something very similar to what you're saying, and she was saying that her son, when she started homeschooling him, she would just fill him and let him read and pursue. And one day he was like, "Mom, did you know that there's the first free black settlement in the United States was just above St. Augustine, Florida, and there was a fort there." She was like, "I had no clue. Now my son is like surpassing me in all of this." So she's like, "So where did we take our field trip?" She's like, "And we were free to do that." She told it in that she was like, "Tell Brenda thank you for all that she's done. I've heard her name, and I'm very appreciative." But it's one of those things that I think that there's so much information. There's so many things our kids can dive into and learn from, and it's so much better when they can get out firsthand and go see it. Like, go see it. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you.
so,
You were just,
so the use of the fund should be left to the parents.
I agree.
That's the whole point of what I'm
Yeah.
pursuing, because your concept of, we didn't name it homeschooling in the law.
Hmm.
We didn't want
Right.
it to look like school, because
Hmm.
education and school are not the same thing. You
That's right.
may get some education in school, but
That's right.
that isn't really education. The point of education is to teach you how to learn, how to
Hmm.
research, how to read, how to do basic math facts. And then beyond that, you're not limited in your education, but
Yes.
you cannot learn all the facts there are in the world. I mean,
No,
thankfully, we have the
no.
internet now. You know, we used to be just limited to what you could learn out of one book when you were studying in one grade. But the point of education is to teach a child how to learn for a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the difference to me in education in school. And
Yeah.
what we don't want to be is public school at home.
Yeah, there was a really
Yeah.
interesting video that Jason and I watched the other day where a guy was just pointing out that the school system largely trains kids stimulus response more than anything else. Like, you do your math work until the bell rings and then you put it away. It's not important anymore. You're going to the next thing. And then, like, the bell rings, you go to lunch. The bell rings, you do this. The bell rings, you do this. And he was saying it was modeled at basically to train factory workers because that's
Mm-hmm.
how the factories operated. Everything was on shifts with the bells um and that's just not, if I'm being honest, that's not my end goal for my children is to like crank
Yeah,
out
not mine
factory
either.
workers.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I became an excellent factory worker cog, you know, like I adapted to the machine and I thrived in school, but then when I got out into the real world, I had to kind of like find my way because the real world doesn't work like that unless you're in a
Mhm.
factory, which I wasn't. But so that's we're looking to produce kids who do know how to learn what needs to be learned and who are going to be lifelong learners and critical thinkers
Critical thinking.
and creative thinkers
Mm-hmm.
rather than just fitting into the machine.
And confident when they don't have the facts and answers. Confident that they can go discover them
Yeah, that they
or
know how to.
have the
Yeah.
tools and be equipped to challenge themselves through the process of learning something new because they've found something else they don't know and they can dive in. That's the kind of thing that we're trying to do for our kids. And I think that many parents are trying to do just that and that they don't deserve to be treated the way that the media is treating them by trying to villainize them simply because they want to provide something better for their kids or they just want to do it themselves. Like they just want to do it themselves. They're their kids
Yeah,
and they can.
we love having our kids around and we love
Yeah,
the
man.
family time that homeschooling gives us. And for
Absolutely.
that reason alone, I would choose home education. Like it's
Yeah.
but there could be a variety of reasons. We actually have multiple reasons. So it's frustrating to see the media trying to slant this all into like I have not met yet a single homeschooler who is homeschooling for racial motivations. I'm just gonna say I have not met a single one.
No, me
But
neither.
you know,
It won't stop them from saying it
I
though.
know it won't.
Yeah. And that's the thing.
It's
So
exactly the opposite, I think, from the homeschoolers that I know. They are more easily embracing people of other races and
oh
nationalities.
yeah.
And there's just not that prejudice present there
Mm-hmm.
that people think there is. It's just not
Right.
there.
No, yeah. I'm thinking about most of the kids in our little homeschool community up here in Tallahassee, and they would literally walk up to anybody, approach anybody, and just start a conversation.
Yeah.
So much
And
so that sometimes we're like, pump the brakes a little.
well, I think that that's sort of a natural outcome of
Yeah.
once you begin home educating, you kind of have to accept the fact that every child is different. And then once you
Mm-hmm.
accept that, then you realize, well, other people's kids obviously are going to even be different from my kids, and other people's
Mm-hmm.
approaches to how they teach their kids is going to be built around their kids' needs, which are different than mine. And it
Yeah.
becomes more natural to not expect everything to be the same, look the same, because that's the life we're living is a life where we're all trying to adapt
Yeah.
to our unique child's talents and gifts and,
Yeah. And
it's
it's
going to
messy.
look
You make
different.
order from the chaos, and they learn from watching you do that, how to do that themselves. And they'll do it
Mhm.
with people, they'll do it with places, jobs, things, because it'll become a habit for them. We're going to cut today's not early, but we're going to end on time today because we have another call to get onto. Brenda and I do. And so this has been a fascinating conversation. It's been really, really good. It's one that I think is very important, mostly because man, I'm just watching the amount of information that just gets thrown around, or misinformation that gets thrown around, and no one really offers the truthful alternative, to be honest with you. And especially in a world where still 90 something percent of people are just a product of the public school system, it's not something people are even think really to second guess. And it's very easy to villainize the fringe element and throw them out there to the wolves, when a lot of these parents are just trying to do the best they can. And I appreciate our legislators and what they've been trying to do to expand school choice, and promote that. I appreciate what our governor is doing by trying to put trust in the hands of the parents, and go with policies, and go with laws that promote trusting parents to do the right thing. And some parents aren't going to. Some parents are, they're going to look for loopholes and freedoms, and you're going to have that. And I appreciate the fact that he still has that trust in the freedom itself, that some of those will weed themselves out, and the rest of them will benefit, and we'll take that. And I appreciate that approach that he's given. And man, we're blessed right now, and I hope we stay blessed. But in the meantime, help us collect these stories so that we can share them and spread them, and make sure that our legislators and our governor knows what homeschooling truly looks like, how it's unique for you, and the impact that it's had to elevate your family. Before we call it a day, Brenda, Crystal, anything you want to finish up with?
Well, it's off the subject, but I want to, every time we have the opportunity, to ask longtime homeschoolers who are willing to serve on committees in their district to help and evaluate homeschoolers who have signed up whose child has had a history of truancy.
Good
It's a
point.
good opportunity for you to help guide a parent if their child would do better in home education, or to keep those people who are not trying to do a good job for their child and avoid truancy issues, to use home education as a loophole.
Right.
So we have, Crystal created a place
Mhm.
on the website. You might tell them where to look.
I pulled it up while you were talking. So
Okay.
if you go to our live community forum, and then you scroll down, you'll actually see review committee volunteers as one of the placeholder areas, and that's where you can go.
You just have to have successfully homeschooled your children for 3 years
Mm-hmm. Yep.
in the state of
Yeah,
Florida. In the state
in
of
the state
Florida.
of Florida. Yeah. And that's a good point, Brenda. That was kind of that fringe element I was referring to, where some people are slipping through the cracks, and that's, there are also things that you can do and be a part of solutions for those things as well. Like, the community can have answers for these things, and be a part of those. Thank you for reminding us of that. That's good, because we just recently added that to our
Yes.
website, so that's really, really good. Crystal, anything you want to say to finish up?
No, not really.
So many words, so little time. All right. Well, thank you guys. Listen, thank you all for being with us. Thank you for listening to our podcast. We hope that the information that we put together and share here is insightful or helpful in some way, at least if not just helping identify trends and spot what's important, or take conversations that sometimes online get blown out of proportion and bring them back to, like, hey, what's law say? Hey, what's legal say? And what are our rights? And let's stand on something concrete, and reorient the conversations to those things. We'll finish up today just like we usually do with another special thank you to our top sponsors. Thank you to Arete, FPEA, and Fisher Precious Metals. And thank you to all of our families who support us. Without anything further, I think we're going to turn you loose to do what we're going to do, and go educate our kids. Y'all have a wonderful Monday.